Welcome to At the Feed Store podcast with me, Erica Lance, where we talk farm, feed, and everything in between. From industry insights to customer stories, we're here to serve up real conversations straight from the heart of rural America. I have Tyler Long here with me today. He's a Purina rep by day, and by night, he is a farmer. He has long Simmentals. So he's going to talk to us a little bit today in regards to pastures, overall maintenance, what helps him on his farm, and also how that integrates back into how he's feeding minerals to his cattle. So Tyler, I appreciate you coming on today. This is wonderful. I like to be able to have a conversation with people in the professional world, but also those people that are farmers.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Erica. Yeah. Like you said, we, by day, been a Purina sales specialist, been with the company for coming up on 11 years here this spring. And we got a family seed stock operation where we market bulls and bred females. So our family for multiple generations have been embedded in the seed stock business, and the cow business is what we do all the way around. So, yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So today I just want to talk about, it's getting to be that time of year where we're thinking about putting our cows back on pasture. If you don't already have them on a dry lot or some sort of situation like that. What is the best way to, what are you doing from the aspect of being able to get the most out of your pastures? And what does your process look like? So I know by the end of the year, especially this last year, things have kind of run down. So what are you looking at to get yourself prepared for this next year?
Yep. So I think there's a lot of things, to be conscious of. And right in this direct area where both you and I work, Erica, guys, typically we're kind of right in the heart of calving right now, kind of March, April timeframe. We all get really gung-ho to go to pasture, but we all probably need to take a step back and really look at how the grass and the forages in this area kind of work, what we have as far as forages, type and kind. You get into identifying what we have as far as warm and cool season grasses and try to align all that with turnout times and how long we're going to graze through the summer. So there's multiple things to really keep in mind, but really just getting in touch with your pasture base and forage base and figuring out what it has capacity for going forward is a real main thing that I think guys and like ourselves and our operations that we really hone in on.
And I think definitely in Southwest Iowa, it just varies because there's just such a difference in every pasture, yep. Right? So every pasture has a little bit more tree cover, or yep. Some doesn't have anything at all, or, just mm-hmm. the way it lays out, the type of soil. So what are those things that you're looking at when it comes to like a soil preference versus like, hey, I'm going to plant this because it's like, mm-hmm. How are you looking at that from your end?
So that gets a little out of my wheelhouse, but yeah, when we start looking, and honestly, when you really think about it, raising cows is, you kind of got to be just as agronomy minded as you are cow minded doing all this. But kind of like I alluded to earlier, I think we've got to identify what we have to work with as far as acres. Like you just mentioned, there's some soil types and pastures that are just more productive than others, especially in this area. We get into areas that got clay hillsides we all know aren't as productive. We get on some good ridges, that in some of these pastures that are worthy of being row cropped, obviously they're going to produce a fair amount of forage. So I think it's really good to identify what we have going on in those pastures as far as that aspects. One good thing we kind of look at is just a barometer in our operation is you can work, with a local agronomist and really hone in on some soil types and do some soil sampling. We do that. Maybe go ahead and take some of those soil maps and start overlaying some CSR values to that just to identify those spots and those particular areas or pastures of, hey, maybe I can push this area of the pasture and stock it a little heavier, how that all fits into a grazing plan. So it's definitely good. We do it in our operation is, just as much on the feed side of things, but especially when it comes to the pasture side of things, is we have soil maps and we have farm maps of every pasture, every hayfield of ours. identifying, what those acres and how productive those acres are.
Yeah. And it definitely, I'm sure when you're saying stocking rate, so you
Mhm.
know how many cows you can put on that, because
Yep.
just because you have that rule of thumb, one
Mhm.
cow calf pair per
Yep.
acre here in
Yep.
our area, that doesn't necessarily ring true
Right.
depending on the type of pasture.
Yeah, it's definitely something needs monitored. We're all guilty of it. We all have X amount of cows in our operation, and we only have X amount of pasture and forage base to deal with. So we just kind of force our stocking rate, if you will, to be what it is with the amount of animals we have around. But when we look at that, and like we do in our operation, we really need to work at it kind of backwards. We really need to see what the productivity of these pasture lands are, and then set our stocking rate according to that versus saying we have X amount of animals to go on X amount of pasture.
And what do you find? I mean, obviously, pastures are very crucial for you as you have a very large herd. What kind of seeding are you guys so that you have adequate amount?
So a lot of our pasture base, I wouldn't quite call it 100%, but it's mainly a fescue forage base. It's been like that. We personally have not seeded any of it. So, I mean, it's just basically native here to Southwest Iowa, like a lot of the producers that you and I work with on a daily basis. So there is some practices you can do as far as interseeding and doing some things like that to help combat some of the fescue issues here in Southwest Iowa. Kind of a twofold deal. You can head down that road. A lot of what we like to do here, it's been quite a few years ago now. So we started implementing a rotational grazing system in our operation and found that to be very helpful. And it's helped with a lot of things. Cow condition, I think the cows do a better job. They graze those pastures more evenly. It's a better thing for the soil. We give those forages a rest to be able to do their thing throughout the season. And it just brings a lot of things to the table that just don't necessarily or just aren't impactful, for this year, but impactful for years to come as far as soil health and fertility go as well.
And what kind of, when you're talking about doing your rotational grazing, what kind of methods do you use to kind of help with that pasture and alleviate some stress?
Yep. So like what we do in our area, and it can be as complex and as simple as you want it. Obviously, simple is better with everything we all have going on in our daily lives. But so like what we do, and it all depends on a lot of things, like we talked before, pasture size, soil types, productivity of forage, and all of that stuff. But so what we do is we actually take like electric fence, and we will make not permanent paddocks, but paddocks that we will rotate those cows through. And it all comes down to pasture size and what you have time and what you can manage too. But ideally, like what we like to do, we don't like to have anything less than 4 paddocks per pasture.
Okay.
Ideally, we would put those cows, or when we go ahead and rotate those cows through those 4 paddocks, we like to have them in about each paddock for 10 days. And that's not always exact. It all depends literally on the productivity of your farm. Some paddocks, you might leave them in there for 3 weeks. Some you might leave them in there for a week because
you're monitoring that grass.
Yeah, we're constantly monitoring the quality and quantity of that forage throughout the season. Where I was going with that is ideally we would have no less than 4 paddocks. So at any one time, we have 3 paddocks that are always resting on a 10 to 14 day period. So in essence, that's given us about a 40-day rest on each one of those paddocks. And when you start really kind of diving into the science, and if you really study grass and forage, like on a fescue forage base around this area that we work with producers in, you give that forage 30 to 40 days of rest. It'll get a good jump. It'll be vegetative. If you think about it like cutting a hay field, you go out and you cut a hay field and you come back 30, 40 days later, there's pretty adequate growth.
Right.
It's basically the same concept. We're just letting the cows do the harvesting. So, yep.
Utilizing that pasture, but not to the point where you're not getting that regrowth.
Yeah. So when we have cows, and like what we have got away from, if you have cows in a continuously grazed setting, those cows are revisiting those same plants that they might have just grazed off a week ago. And that forage never has, it's just using all of its energy to try to keep growing, but we're never giving it a rest opportunity by holding those cows off of those certain paddocks for 30 to 40, maybe 50 days at a time. We're letting that forage go ahead and get up. It's vegetative. It's not just constantly using its energy to keep growing as the cows keep nubbing it off.
Yeah. So when we're talking about that, you're talking about having these paddocks. Now, when you have them in those areas, what are some of the supplemental, like we've talked, minerals are obviously very important. So what kind of minerals are you using? Do you have an additional salt you're using? Just give us an idea of what your layout kind of looks like within those paddocks.
Yep. So ideally we would have free choice salt set out most of the time. That all kind of does depend on mineral consumption. A lot of the minerals like you would carry here, Erica, come complete with mineral in them. So a guy would not have to set out salt if they didn't want to. Obviously, this time of year, high mag, we want to set high mag out for probably about a 30-day stint in here, kind of going into grass green up. Beyond that, we kind of focus on like a breeder type mineral supplement. So like we in our operation lean very heavily like on our Avela-4 type minerals or a mineral with an Avela-4 option that's got the organic minerals, the zinc, the manganese, the cobalt.
And that helps with that heat aspect too, because you have them on a primarily.
Yeah. So it does the Avela-4 product or component of that. It does a very good job of helping combat some of those fescue issues that we see. It helps those cows digest that forage a little better. Also, from another standpoint, we know the fescue forage base is a little depleted in comparison to some other forages out there in the country when it comes to like some of those minerals that I just mentioned. So it does help with that aspect and just overall digestibility.
Yeah, and we had talked about it on our last channel that we did. That we did say, hey, it would be different if the cattle were grazing. There's no fences, things of that sort. So they can go after that source. But we know that is not available. So that's why it's very important for them to have the right minerals.
Right.
Especially when you're doing your rotational grazing. So when do you keep a mineral feeder in each one of those paddocks then, or are you moving that around?
So for us, the way we're set up, Erica, and it's different from operation to operation and a lot of the ones that I work with. So for us, we're fortunate enough in a lot of our pastures where we have them paddocked off, we have one central water source for the most part. And it kind of works backwards. You get out to some big range country, they would use like a mineral supplement or a tub and draw those cattle to where the forages are at. Around here, the producers you and I are working with, we're kind of dealing in some smaller pasture sizes. So they're pretty well evenly grazing or distributed throughout that paddock. So where I was going with that is, our mineral is usually there by the water source or very close to.
So you don't necessarily have to move it around.
No. Yep. Yeah. So it's basically all in one central location. We would just drop a hot wire gate down and they've got mineral and water to them available no matter what.
Now, when you're monitoring the overall, say that paddock itself, can you tell when that starts to go down? Can you see an increase in some of your mineral consumption, or does it stay pretty steady?
It stays pretty steady, but that's a good point because you can kind of use that as a barometer, especially as, like I said, in this particular area, the producers we work with, smaller paddock sizes, smaller pastures, you can tell when the forage starts to get short or it starts to deplete in quality, their mineral consumption will go up. So we do kind of use that as a barometer to see what is going on with our forage base out there.
Yeah, no, that's great because that's the biggest thing we're looking at is to make sure and educate people in the aspect of what we see as producers and how we're doing it, right? So that's a big factor for what I would like to do in this channel is be able to tell people, hey, this is what we use and this is why we do it, right? So, and you didn't quite say, but you have a large...
Yeah, we have a lot of animals running around.
So you have a lot of opportunity to kind of adjust and really kind of see how things are working and get a quick result based on the amount of head that you do.
Yep, definitely, for sure. The other thing kind of leading into that is I do encourage guys or producers to take a look at. It's no secret what the national cow herd is doing. Everybody, cows are going to town. Very few are getting replaced. There's, maybe not as many young producers coming into the business. So kind of, coupling all that together, we've condensed all of our cow herds to maybe some of our more poorer pieces of ground, because a lot of this other ground and opportunity with it is going to row crops. So we really need our supplement practices that we have done in the past. We don't think about it, but we're leaning very heavy on our supplement practices more so than what we have in past years, just due to condensing those cows down to some of our poor acres that we have left in our operations.
Maybe stuff that isn't that tillable. Like my pasture is very hilly. And there's no way that you can farm that. So that's why it is what it is. Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And you have to think about that definitely and how you're bringing that down. Now, do you do any sort? So say you have some sort of drought issue or, do you go ahead and start supplementing with hay, bales, and depending on how your paddocks are looking? Is that something that you take into account as well?
So it all depends on how we're set up. And like I said, we dove into this rotational grazing thing quite a few years back. So over the years, as we've kind of built numbers in our cow herd, and we have multiple facets going on within our seed stock operations. So we retain a lot of heifers. So we basically run them as one herd. We run all of our cows in one herd. We do try to, if it works out, for pasture splits, and there's a lot of other things to navigate. As far as the management practice you're just kind of talking about, we like to try to separate off our first calf heifers and send them to another pasture that we know maybe isn't quite as hot as in fescue, or just so if we need to, we can manage those a little differently. So for the most part, back to your question though, we try to couple different things. There's some pastures we will couple our rotational grazing program with a fertilizer program to help increase the tonnage of that forage. But we also know over the years where kind of our sweet spot is for our stocking rates and our carry capacity. So we're always very conscious of that, to really not overstock our pastures and to maybe put ourselves in that situation to have to feed hay. We try to avoid that. We all know in the cow business, there's going to be that one year where it's not going to rain and we're going to be forced to set out some sort of supplemental feed, maybe in a normal grazing time. But for the most part, we try to navigate that off of our rest periods and things like that we talked about, to not have to.
If you are doing some sort of supplemental feed, what kind of feed do you guys do? Just so people understand, I mean, it is, it happens.
Yeah, it does. Yep. So before, so mineral is out every day of the year in front of our cows, whether they're on a pasture setting or like this time of year, they're on a TMR. The other thing we start looking at, if forage does get short, we would supplement protein. We kind of know off of a lot of the forage samples that we have sent in over the years, whether it be pasture or hay, protein in this area is just kind of right there. Early in the season, it's good enough. You get later in the season, it's just kind of right there. Giving those cows a little bit of a protein supplement with some urea or NPN added in there, I think is a good thing, just to help them utilize what's out there. Yeah. So, and especially, we get later in the fall and we head to corn stalks in this part of the area. Yeah, protein supplement is a pretty big component there for 60 to 90 days. And
that's definitely something that I utilize to take off my pasture is putting them out on stock.
Yep.
That helps a lot.
Yep.
For my aspect where I can't do rotational grazing. It's just the lay of the land.
Yep. Absolutely.
It makes it very difficult.
Right.
Just the way it is. So being able to get them off and keep them off a little bit longer to help it this time of year when you're starting to get that regrowth, that's huge for us.
Yes.
And then you're talking about minerals. Obviously, that's a big factor. So what other items would you say are important for us to consider when we're talking about pasture grazing throughout the summer months?
Yep. So a couple of things. So focusing in on basically the cow or the animal herself. I always caution caution's not the right word. I encourage guys to look at the size of their cows. Maybe look at some of those cull cows you take to town and look at those weight tickets. We know we start increasing body weight, on those mature cows, they're obviously going to take more. And without doing a deep dive into the math, Erica, the difference in, let's call it a 1,400 pound cow versus a 1,700 pound cow. And believe me, in my travel, there's a lot of 1,700 pound cows out there. Just looking at it in the summer months, that 1,700 pound cow is going to take anywhere from about 15 to 20% more overall forage than that 1,400 pound cow. Now, I'm not telling everybody, start downsizing your cows, don't pay attention to it. But I think it's just something to be cautious of. As long as those bigger cows or heavier cows are pulling their weight when they're bringing a calf to the weaning pen, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
We just need to be conscious of that, of what resources are that we have available for our bigger animal that we're going to feed.
When you're regarding your stocking rate, you're like, hey, this cow and this cow, there's a few hundred pounds, but that can make a huge difference in the aspect of what it's going to do to your pasture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing, flipping back over to the grass side of things, one thing that we are very conscious of, and I truly believe so, and this is kind of more agronomy minded than cow minded, but if we're out there and let's picture our cows out on a pasture grazing, once we remove 60% of the forage that we have out there, we start to hinder our root growth by 50%. So when you start thinking in terms of we start getting later into the season, later into the fall, and we've removed a lot of that residue and a lot of that plant matter out there going into winter, we want to try to leave about half of that out there just so we're doing the right thing for that root system, for that plant to repair, to go into winter, to give it a good jump start going into the following spring. That's something we're very cautious of at our place.
Yep. So that makes total sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Definitely. It's all about, that's the one thing, guys. That's why we have pastures, right?
Yeah.
To utilize that forage. I know it's cheap right now, but it's not always that way.
Correct.
So if we can utilize the pastures the best we can, that's ideal.
Yes.
So that's the biggest reason why I had you on today, just to discuss that, because you do have a large cow-calf operation and you understand, because you have multiple different pastures that you're utilizing. And that's big for people to understand overall, like how that looks.
Right. Yep.
What happens? Why are we doing what we do? That's a big factor.
Yep.
We're not all about, hey, we're going to push the feed to them,
Right.
How do we utilize what we currently have?
And that's the thing. You make a good point there. Okay. There's things like we do in our operation, like we talked, the mineral supplement. We supplement protein certain times of the year, but I would rather see the producers that you and I work with on a daily basis really hone in and focus on their base feedstuffs. Like in this instance, we're talking their pasture and their forage, or, their harvested feedstuffs, whether that be alfalfa, hay, and silage. I want their base diet to be right, because we know in the nutrition world, 85% of that cow's needs is for energy, for protein, for minerals, is coming from that base feed or that base forage that we're feeding them. So that in essence has to be right first before we really start focusing on a lot of this other stuff. This other stuff is important, but foremost, their base diet has to be correct to begin with.
No, I appreciate you coming on today.
Yep.
And, if anybody has any other questions, so we'll certainly take those, and you can check out our website and just give us a call if you have any questions. Thanks for visiting at the Feed Store Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Follow us online and check out our full lineup of products on feedersgrain.com. See you next time.